Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here with you all, even if remotely. In this talk, we'll see how to use some great feature of Postgres and database in Django. In the database section of the Django documentation, we can read that Django attempts to support as many features as possible on all database backends. However, not all database backends are alike. Did you know that Django framework was named after guitarist Django Reinhardt? I hope so. However, Django per se is a database-agnostic web framework, but real-world projects based on it are not. Postgres has the richest feature of any Django-supported database, and we'll see in this talk how to use some of these superpowers. But first of all, I introduce myself. I'm Paolo Melchiorre, and I'm the CTO of 20Tab. This is a product company based in Italy. I'm a software engineer and a long-time Python backend developer. After using Django for a few years, I became a contributor to the project. I also use Postgres as a database for all my Django projects. And now it's time to create one of this project. As usual, to create a Django project, I use the latest Python 3 stable release. I create and activate a virtual environment, in which then I install the latest Django version, in this case, Django 4.1. Then, using the Django start project command, I create the basic file of our project. So let's see what it takes to add Postgres to this newly created project. I think many of you are familiar with this drawing from The Little Prince, a snake digesting an elephant. This drawing is used as the header of social accounts of psycogp, the Postgres driver for Python. I think it represents its goal very well, Python with Postgres inside. psycogp is the most used and advanced Postgres driver for Python. It implements the Python DB API 2.0 specification, and it's distributed under the LGPL license. The library was released 20 years ago, and over the time has been constantly improved and kept aligned with Postgres. Version 3 was released just over a year ago. psycogp is a wrapper for libpq, the Postgres C client library. To install this package on a Debian-based system like Ubuntu, you can use the apt package manager, like I'm showing you. For most operating systems, the quickest way to install psycogp is using the package available in the Python package indexes. And now let's see how to use psycogp in Django. To use Postgres as a database in our Django project, we modified the settings file, adding the psycogp-based database backend and the connection parameters of our Postgres database, which we may have locally or remotely or in Docker. If you embrace the 12-factor methodology, you can define a database URL variable in your environment. And depending on whatever you use, Django database URL directly or Django configuration, your database section should look like something like this one. Let's see now our database in action. We use the example model defined in the making queries on the Django documentation. For our test queries, we'll only use the author model and the entry model, both containing various types of fields we can search on for do some queries. We can perform basic queries like this on our model, but actually, we can run these queries using all the other supported databases as well. And what we are really interested in this talk is using Postgres-specific feature from Django. For the same reason, in 2014, Mark Tamnil, a Django core developer, started a crowdfunding campaign to develop a module to contain fields for a number of Postgres-specific data types. The campaign was a success, and the new module was merged in Django 1.8. The module now contains Postgres-specific field, indexes, function, extension, and so on. Over the years, important function has been added, such as JSON fields, full text search, random UUID, and operator classes. JSON fields have become usable also in the other supported database, but only from Django version 3.1, which was released in 2020, 5 years after being introduced in the Postgres module. So to use all the features of the Postgres module, just add it into the installed apps variable in the settings file of our project. And now, let's get to know some features of this module better. I took this photo during the sprint day after the DjangoCon Europe 2017 in Florence, in Italy. And that day, I completed a pull request to add a database function in the Postgres module for Django 2.0. I was helped by Mark Tamnil, the original creator of the Postgres module, and by Marcus Holterman, a Django core developer, both in this photo. The database function I'm talking about is random UUID. The random UUID database function returns a version 4 random UUID. It's contained in the PGCrypto module that provides cryptographic function for Postgres. It can be activated using the crypto extension migration operation. And from version 13 of Postgres, this function is included in the core. To see the function in action, we'll add a UUID field in our entry model. This field uses the related Python module, and only when used on Postgres, they store a specific UUID data type in the database. The database will not generate it for you, so it's recommended to use default. But note that the UUID callable is passed to default and not an instance of it. Using the Postgres function, you can update all the values in a model way faster than cycling over all the entries and generating a new value with the UUID for Python function. I personally use this technique on my laptop to set in few seconds UUIDs in nearly 1 million rows. It's pretty fast. I took this other photo during the sprint day after EuroPython 2017 in Rimini. I promoted a working group on Django, and some other developers joined me. That day, we started the transition of the Django project website search function from an external search engine to the Postgres full-text search. Since then, I've written an article and given more than one presentation on full-text search. So I skip some implementation detail in this talk. The full-text search support in the Postgres module has specific fields, expression, and function. If your Postgres version is recent enough, you can also use specific indexes, phrase searches, and web search style, which is very convenient. Without any customization, we are able to perform a full-text search on a single field of the entry model. For example, we can search for a word in the plural form and have results in the singular form. This is a very convenient way to start using the Postgres full-text search out of the box in Django. To speed up the full-text search, we can add a search vector for the entry model and use it to create a functional GIN index on the same model. The functional indexes are an addition on Django version 3.2, available on all Django database backends, but the GIN index is only available in the Postgres backend. After that, we can search for a word using a syntax similar to the one used by web search engines and have more accurate results. We can also use the syntaxes using the search query with the search type attribute. Furthermore, the SQL queries will be faster thanks to the GIN index. With this photo, we move virtually in Norway, more precisely in Trondheim. I took this photo because I really liked the effect of these typical houses on the water. They are all similar to each other, but repeated, like data in an array. The array field makes Postgres array types available directly in Django. They are very convenient for storing arrays or similar data without creating a new model for them. You specify other Django model field as a basis for Django array fields. Also, its size can be defined and it can be even multidimensional. For example, we can store multiple email in our author model by defining an array of email using the email field as a base for our array fields. We can then query our author looking for an email. The content of field itself is represented as a list. The resulting SQL code uses all Postgres-specific operator for the array, which is very fast. Unfortunately, the default array field widget in the Django admin is a simple input text with comma separated value, but using these Python packages, you can represent in the Django admin the values as multiple dynamically addable input texts, and they are very convenient to use. I took this photo in San Francisco. We are now virtually moving in California because the packages we are going to talk about is provided by the California Civic Data Coalition. It's an open source network of journalists and computer programmers from news organizations across America. Django PostgreSQL is a Python package to quickly import and export delimited data with Django support for Postgres copy command. The copy command moves database between tables and standard file. Copy2 copies the content of a table to a file, and copy_from copies data from a file to a table. To more flexibility, Django PostgreSQL uses a temporary table that are automatically dropped at the end of every session. To benchmark PostgreSQL, we'll use, in this session, a file containing all the geographic names from the OpenStreetMap project. We create a new model that maps each column contained in the CSV file into a field. We have to replace the model default manager with one from the package of Django PostgreSQL, like you can see in this sample code. Here we use the file with all the geographic names of Italy. The file is more than 200 megabytes. And to upload the file, we use the specific queryset method to which we pass the file path in our file system. The loading speed is impressive, almost 1 million records in just over 3 seconds on my laptop, which is quite old. Under the hood, Django PostgreSQL executes several SQL statements, create a temporary table based on the content of the CSV file, upload the content from the file to the temporary table in just over 2 seconds, It inserts the data of the temporary table into the table managed by the featured Django model, applying some transformation, and finally drops the temporary table. To reduce this space and transmission bandwidth, we have compressed our file in gzip format, reducing the file to a fifth. We can pass our compressed file directly to the Django Postgres copy without having to decompress it. Loading is done in a shorter time than before, and I want to repeat it because it's impressive. Almost 1 million records in just over 3 seconds on my old laptop. Now we are virtually moving back in Italy with this photo that I took in a wood in Abruzzo, the region where I live. I'm showing you this photo because now we are going to talk about trees. Postgres L3 exactly. Django L3 is a tree extension to support hierarchical tree-like data in Django models using the native Postgres extension named L3. It's a simpler and faster alternative to implement materialized paths compared to more used Django packages. The package has a path field and an abstract tree model. To add tree-like hierarchy to the entry model, we add a path field inheriting from the tree model that are provided directly by Django L3. We also had a dedicated Postgres GIST index on the same fields to speed up the queries. This is a tree representation of the example hierarchical structure that we have stored in the path field of our model. I took this example from the Postgres L3 documentation, so you can find it also in the Postgres website. We perform a hierarchical query to filter all the contained models of a particular path, sort the results path by tree structure, and then take all the subpaths of it. The resulting SQL statement uses the L3 operator to filter the table and the GST index to speed up the operation and the sorting of it. With this photo, we are now virtually moving on the path of my last hike in the Italian Apennines. I already used this photo in my latest article series about maps with Django, which you can read on my blog. But I want to briefly talk about the geographical extension of Postgres used by GeoDjango. PostGIS is a Postgres extension, and it's also the best database backend for GeoDjango. It internally integrates spatial data and has spatial data types, indexes, and functions. In this chart, I tried to synthesize the compatibility table of the open source geographic database backends supported by GeoDjango. In the Django documentation, there are 3 of these tables: spatial lookups, database function, aggregate function. As you can see, PostGIS is the only geographic backend that supports 100% of this feature. And if you are interested in using this feature, you can read my article about it. There are also many other Postgres-specific features that can be used directly in Django. For example, you can use a lot of indexes and aggregation function only available in Postgres. You can also use the trigram extension to perform fast searching for similar strings. There are also specific fields only available in Postgres, like ranged fields, and more. Before saying goodbye, I want to share with you some tips based on my experience as a Postgres user with Django. The first is read the documentation in the Django website, because it's full of information about the Postgres module, and it's rich of feature and example. Read also the details about this feature that are supported by Django directly in the Postgres documentation, because it helps you to understand how things work under the hood. Read also the source code of both this project, because there is something you can learn only from the code and you can find in the documentation. And another tip is to search for questions or Stack Overflow, but try to answer a question by yourself instead of reading answer. Last but not least, you can also study this talk because it's released with the Creative Commons license, and I share the link at the end. The psycogp library is under active development, and you can use this content to learn more about it, get involved, and also sponsor its development. The company I work for, 20tab, is one of the sponsors of this library. Speaking of which, in 20tab, we have developed many Django projects using Postgres. You can find out more about our open source project and our Pythonic work using our contacts. And finally, to find out more about my personal works with Django and Postgres, use all my contacts, and with this QR code you can download this presentation to my website. You can also ask me your question about the conference channel, and I will be happy to answer them. And thanks again for having me, and enjoy the other talk in the conference. Ciao a tutti.